And moving on to the next picture, this is an interesting one because those impulse engines, I don't know if they're impulse engines, they kind of are displaying thrust,
Very
Yeah.
much
which
like the
is something you don't,
jellyfish from
it's
JoJo.
something you don't see in Star Trek very much at all. So what kind of engines are those?
Or is this
Well, those
thrusters,
are
perhaps?
impulse engines,
Right.
but what we're mistaking here is we're projecting our experiences on what we're seeing. Like, oh, we've seen
A-frame.
shuttle launches. That looks like a conventional, chemical rocket engine. But what we're seeing may not be exactly what
Well,
we
it's
think we're
plasma,
seeing.
isn't it? It's heated plasma.
So the idea is like when you crank the impulse engines to maximum, there's all sorts of like little nitty gritties that have like bonded to the material that when you crank it and all that immediate explosion of energy burns off all these chemicals. So this is like the first second of impulse, and then a second later they would just be glowing and there would be no effect.
So this is the
I was just
exhaust
kind of trying to
fumes, basically.
I was trying to think of some kind of like these nitty gritty details of the world where like what does it look like when you rocket to maximum impulse? Like maybe there's some kind of like cool like burn off, but like of course there's not sustained thrust because we don't see that in Star Trek. But we also don't necessarily see the engines lighting up to full impulse immediately and stuff like that.
Very cool.
It's just a detail.
Nice.
But the next photo is another detail which we hadn't seen until right now. Basically, this is the Shuttle Bay. Lovely to see some NX pods. I see two NX pods and three NX pods and what looks to be a rotating configuration.
There are four in there. There's one below the floor that you can't see. And
Interesting.
that whole thing rotates and the shuttles stay in the same orientation as they rotate around. And at the very bottom there's a drop bay like on the NX class. And on the sides are like the loading bays, so there are doors in there that you can step into the shuttles and then shift down to the bottom and get launched out the bottom. It's just an economical way to hold them.
So it's docking through the back, launch through the bottom.
Yeah, you could dock up through the bottom as well. Depends on there's
A good driver or not.
there's a variety of things you can do. The back is mostly for maintenance and like if a ship that wasn't part of the normal complement had to land. So say the Pacific can only hold four shuttles in that carriage, but if somebody else was like, we need to land our shuttle pod, like, well, we've got space for two back there, that sort
Wow.
of thing.
Very well thought
That's
out.
awesome.
And then a great little in-between. 'Cause it's clearly TOS styled, but with a basic mechanical nature of an NX.
Right.
Very neat.
Now, we mentioned earlier that the other shuttle was bigger, like runabout size almost. Can it land in here, or is that the other bay?
Yeah, definitely can't land in there.
Okay.
The bottom of the saucer, there are two pens that are shaped just like that runabout shuttle, and they dock on the bottom, flush with the bottom of the ship. And
Very cool.
that's something we've definitely not seen, but
So Captain's Yacht style.
Captain's Yacht style, yeah, but they're just normal shuttlecraft or normal. They're big, but they're part of the complement.
Fascinating. And while we're on the subject, how much of an improvement is this NX shuttle pod then? Obviously they're relatively newish, possibly for the NX, and this is 40 years. So
Yeah.
is it basically the same or just a bit upgraded?
The idea is it's basically the same ship, but it'd be totally original. Like they're using the same design, but all the interiors and the engines and that would all be fresh, brand new stuff. The idea is like, modern militaries use old equipment that's totally gutted and replaced modern,
Yeah.
but the outer shell is essentially the same.
Very cool. The next photo, we get to see the actual bay from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
It's cute.
Yeah, so is that whole module just a shuttle bay then?
We have Photon Torpedoes, we have Shuttle Bay, and we have the deflector. The Shuttle Bay extends only about halfway into the the depth of that. The front half is the deflector, the back half is the Shuttle Bay, and those two side pods are photons.
And how many that you can fit? I'm assuming this is the same photon torpedoes as we see in Enterprise. Same photonic torpedoes.
Yeah, pretty much the same thing.
So how many can you fit? Is that chock-a-block, or is that sort of is there a secondary storage inside the saucer? Do you think just
I never imagined that the original original model, which is something I never actually put back into the details. Thanks for reminding me. Is there were another module thing, which were ammo canisters that loaded into the bottom and top of those bays. The idea was that they were exposed on the outside, so you could easily access them, and there were like cartridges of photon torpedoes that you'd load in, and
You're getting
that's
so
the
real
place.
here, Eric. It's ridiculous. That's just
That's the only place. Well, a big driving force of designing the Pacific was to make the most authentic Star Trek ship experience, where every little thing, like, well, where are the photon torpedoes? Well, they're in little canisters that are built specifically. And the idea being that'd be something that they came up with during the war. Like, we have to build a ship that we can easily reload. It needs to stop in like a pit stop in the star base, load it, and get it out immediately. Like, we don't have time for,
I'm gonna be honest,
loading.
Eric. This kind of you'll probably quite like this. You're feeling like our generation's Matt Jeffries, sort of retaking the designs and saying, "This is the design. Let's make it real." Because he obviously made it quite making sense real, but you're taking that to the absolute extreme. You've had years to develop this. I feel like he probably would have done the same stuff with this design. So I'm giving you
That's
more
an honor.
credit now because it's certainly you're really blowing my mind with how much thought.
Yeah, the way you've thought this through is amazing. But I do have a question regarding those torpedo tubes.
Go right ahead.
Later, we see them firing forward, and it says there are 4 tubes. Now, there's the 2 facing rear as well in those
Yeah,
same
well,
side modules.
Yeah, what we see here is a rear photon torpedo tube, and there's an identical one on the front. So, like, somewhere in between there's a split, and the idea being the ammo canister would service both tubes, but you could fire one or the other. Like, I don't think they wouldn't go all the way through, but like you could load one way or load the other way, based on the needs.
All right, so the next shot is a great shot of it leaving a starbase or some such facility. Awesome promotional shot. Now, one question I do have real quick, and we kind of talked about this in our mission briefing. That dish at the top, is that just a sensor palette and sensor suite? Or what is that?
That
exactly?
is the dish on top is the subspace antenna.
Right.
So all sorts of things that use subspace, which are like long range sensors, faster than light communication, it's up there. And it's something we didn't see on the NX class, but like the NX class also had to use buoys to extend its subspace range. So the idea is like for a period of time, Starfleet ships needed like a dedicated antenna for subspace, just to kind of age the design a little bit. So that is a dedicated subspace antenna.
Cool.
Very cool. One thing that I'd speculated when we talked about the missile tubes. If you look at this picture, we can see 4 distinct. We thought potentially tubes at the front and also some at the side.
On the very front edge of
yes.
those are sensors.
Okay.
That whole front opening is packed with sensors, and then there are 2 little rectangular edges on the details on the edges of that opening, and those are tractor beam emitters. We have tractor beams in this era, albeit not really good ones, but they're there.
How long after the signing of the Federation Charter is this?
Well, 20.
Sorry, that's an annoying question.
40 or less than 40 years. I mean,
I think it's 7 years after NX, the last episode.
2162.
That sounds familiar.
So this is 2200. So
yeah, because obviously when you sign that charter, and I've said this for Axel multiple times, this sharing of tech, everyone else has tractor beams, so I think it'd be very natural. Yeah. So next photo is firing phasers, and we had a lot to say about this photo. First of all, the coloring red, which is more NXE compared to the TOS style, although I think the coloration is a bit more Kelvin-y. That's what I took, and same with having exterior phaser turrets again. Is that one of the influences, the Kelvin? Because there is that somewhere in the universe. Is that part of the influence?
Yeah, I definitely that's something I really did love about the Kelvin was its red beams that are like really, I don't know what the word is.
Punchy?
They felt really like real and dangerous. So red is a great color. I don't know, danger. I don't know. There is some of that, but I'll just leave it at that for right now.
Okay. Fair enough.
But one thing we said about these phase turrets, we'll talk about it a bit more detail when we get the detail photo. If you look at the TOS style, which I guess they're recessed, but if you go back to the motion picture, I suppose Axnar, bull turrets, they're far smaller. These ones are far, far larger. We know the NX-01 has
Yeah.
phase cannons. These are probably the first true phasers. Stuart said very well that these are much bigger than I think we'd think they are. So are these kind of the predecessor to the later on turrets? When they obviously are just because of timeline, but they're bulkier because they have to be. That they
Right,
then have
yeah.
time to shrink.
The idea is, they're the same general shape as
Yeah.
like the ball turrets of TMP era, but those are vastly miniaturized.
Yeah.
Like a phaser turret big enough to destroy a ship requires a lot of energy and a lot of hardware, and we have a big, it's quite large. I just thought that was logical. The other thing is these do, you mentioned the NX phase cannons. These do also recess into the hull.
Right. I was about to ask that.
They deploy and they retract. Okay. We very, very rarely see them retracted in any of these shots, but they do retract.
And are there two on the bottom as well?
There are two on the bottom. They're right on top of each other. They kind of have like the same well.
And will we see all four fire at the same time?
I'm not going to say what
spoilers
may or may
Hasn't
not
made it yet.
be fired. The other thing is we may see different phaser colors fired from the same turrets.
Fans will know that I like the sound of that.
Different phaser settings.
The frequencies, because people ask, well, why is it blue in TOS and why is it orange later? And the idea is if you watch Best of Both Worlds, when they're modulating phaser frequencies shooting at the Borg, they fire green, orange, yellow, blue.
Yep.
The color of phasers, the color of phasers is the frequency that they're firing at. Mm-hmm. So we may see TOS blue phasers and we may see red phasers, we may see orange phasers, depending on exactly what they're shooting at and the conditions.
So is the Kelvin part of your timeline then?
I accept the reality of the Kelvin.
Well, it's canon. I'm just a bit okay. So
I've done quite a lot of research on the Kelvin. I love the ship in the general idea, and I know this is controversial. I don't have a problem with the size of the Kelvin either.
It's deep space exploration.
I did a size comparison for a friend recently where I had an Iowa class battleship and an Arleigh Burke destroyer, which is like a modern United States Navy ship of the line, and it's a huge size difference. But the Arleigh Burke would destroy an Iowa class battleship like that. It just has to fire a missile from outside the battleship's gun ranges and blow it out of the water. So size and technology don't typically, actually I would say they don't even typically go together. Things get smaller, my iPhone is much smaller than a car phone from
Defiant.
Or the Defiant, right? That's the most advanced ship is the smallest one. So I don't have a problem with the size. And the testament to the Kelvin, I guess, in the Pacific design is with the new scale, the saucer is actually wider than a Constitution class saucer. Not nearly as big as a Kelvin saucer, but it's I imagine that there's some fluctuation with the width of a saucer. It doesn't need to be. It's not like the magical radius of a Constitution class can't be bigger than that before that. So there is. I did want to respect the Kelvin, and there is some Kelvin respect in here with some of the shapes and the
detailing the bridge module and how it's tapering and all that stuff.
The shape of the bridge module, right?
Although
I took out the windows on front,
which is good. It's a good decision. Although the question that was actually leading into was, are there pulse phasers then? Because that is something we do see in Enterprise, and I've fought very hard to say there are. So do you see pulse phasers?
We will not see them, and there are no little miniature turrets that pop up
apart from the missile tubes, which you could theoretically.
Right, that's the only unexpected weapon, but there are no extra energy pulse weapons or anything like that. There just wasn't a place for them on this ship.
All right, so moving on to the next photo is when I talked about earlier, the shooting the photon torpedoes. How rapid fire are these torpedo tubes? Let's say
because that looks. I mean, that's pretty.
I was going to say those look like they're coming out of the same tube. Those
it looks like that, but they're not.
Okay.
It's a perspective problem. These are actually fired parallel. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to tell from that picture. It's actually really hard to tell from that picture.
I think it's also because there's still a residual burst from the tube, whereas not the other tube.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. If there, you might still see some of. I don't know. It's. They're firing both tubes right there. So they would not fire very rapidly. You would have to load another torpedo and fire it several seconds between tubes. The idea here being they're firing them staggered so they can, sustain fire longer. Yeah. Something interesting about this picture is the only time I show the thrusters, the maneuvering thrusters. on the left side of the image, you can see one on the nacelle and two on the saucers are rotating the ship.
That's nice to see. That's cool to see in Star Trek
because we know we'll they're there. See that, yeah.
You never see them. Yeah.
You only see them in that one TNG episode where Picard's flying the Enterprise through the asteroid field.
Yes.
And you see the thrusters.
And the next photo, which we saved for this, is a nice schematic section. Let's see if there's anything. Oh, it's 6.7. We've got faster.
Oh, it did get faster.
Ooh.
Interesting.
And the length, did the length change?
This is the new
the length from 212 to you've got 251, so about the same size as the Connie, 30 meters. That definitely represents that. So yeah, definitely brought up a bit.
The crew did not grow yet, but it's still there.
They're having babies soon. It's fine.
The big difference here is I now represent the fact that there are 4 shuttle pods in that like rotating thing. Because when I originally designed the shuttle bay, it was just the front part where you could land 2. And then I'm like, you know what? We could fit a lot more ships in here with a different way of storing them. And you could store 6 in there, but we don't need that many. Though the Kelvin had 20 something, so
yeah, 20, yeah.
Had a lot of shuttles.
Yeah. And the next photo is a great size comparison with a little guy standing, and he's not following the rules. It says stand clear or stay clear.
I know. I was imagining that it's like, hey, quick, take the picture while I break the rules.
Before the captain sees. Yeah.
Right.
But no, it's great to see those phaser turrets size-wise. I mean, the ones from the motion picture are probably about the same size, but they're recessed more into the hull, I think.
Yeah, that's possible. I've never done like I love putting people next to things.
Yeah, it really helps.
It just makes the design feel so much more real. And I love seeing people like, do Constitution classes. Like you can see people in the windows and stuff. Because like you get such a better scale. I'm not sure how big the ones in TMP would be.
I think these are bigger. Especially if the source is bigger. I think these are, my gut says these are quite a lot. Like
they might
20% or something bigger. One thing that really struck me in the previous episode of this is that that's the ball turret, but really it's just that little dish, because the rest of it is the mechanical nature needed to fire. But really, the emitter's that small thing. That
it only comes out of something that's big around.
That shocked me.
Well, the beam isn't super wide. It's you gotta focus that energy as much as possible, so that the beam would be wider than you probably, but not.
But not wider than me, because I'm fatter.
Anyway, on to the next photo. This is probably the missile hangars.
I
love your depth of field.
Yes, well, that particularly is not a missile, but it's one of the hatches open.
Is that an escape pod or is that a probe?
I imagine that was a probe. I mean, I just wanted to illustrate it, and I kind of just knocked something up really quick. I got to make something, but that would be a probe.
And so going to the next picture, we see, now we speculated earlier, are these solar panels or are these cosmic ray collectors like the Jupiter station has? Rick gave us static for that because we said they were solar panels and he said they're not. So
yeah, I loved hearing Rick talk about that because I knew in my heart that I had done something similar on the Pacific, and I'm like, yes, Rick's on my side. But
Rick Cannon.
Yeah. I would love to get Rick involved with all this because I want to do a technical manual, and he's good. Anyway, that aside, what we're currently seeing right here in this picture are thermal control panels that direct heat away from the long-range sensor array, which generates a lot of heat. Because heat in space, we think that space is really cold, but that's meaningless when there's no air, because you feel cold because cold air draws heat away from your body. But when you're in space, nothing draws heat away from your body, so you actually don't freeze in space. But what could happen in space is something generating heat would overheat and melt because there's nowhere for the heat to go. So if you look on the International Space Station, there are details very much like this, these opaque white panels that are actually filled with little tubules of something. I forget what the like it's like a gas that draws heat away from the habitable areas of the station. So what we see here is a heat thing. However, this particular rig can be, you can reel out other things like cosmic ray collectors could be reeled out. And on other pictures of the Pacific, we see something that looks a lot more like solar panels. Like
Yes,
it's
that we've seen in previous episode. Yeah.
at other times it's this opaque white. And I'm not sure if maybe it's more futuristic than all that, and it's like it'll turn, like it'll just crossfade into a different material, like it's like some adaptive material that like, okay, well, turn on the heat mode, and it's suddenly directing heat, and then turn
Hey,
on
this is the future. We have warp
cosmic
drive.
ray
Why
mode, and
wouldn't-
it like
Yeah.
shifts, and it collects energy. And the other thing was the idea is that if there are cosmic ray collectors there, they would also be like sensors, like you could sense the velocity and the density of radiation hitting those panels and stuff like that. So it's a very sophisticated and multi-purpose piece of equipment.
And the next shot is a rather exciting one. I got a bit of a fan glee moment. This is the engineering room, I'm assuming. And do you know how I know? Because boy, is it a cool meld of NX and TOS. So do you want to talk to us about this?
Well, exactly what you said. Like the main core idea behind this was, how do I make something that justifies both? Like TOS, it doesn't really feel like a real engineering room, and then it's so different from the NX room. So like, how can we justify both of those things? So I took the most iconic elements of the original series engineering room, like the big bank of consoles and the cathedral, and I pulled the cathedral out into the main room, and then added another bank of consoles to create symmetry. But those, the consoles with the ladder is very like TOS, and then the shape of the actual engine is like the NX, and then we have those like pods that are in the middle of the floor, and TOS they're in the middle of the floor here, just blending the most iconic elements of both sets to create something that is believable but also justifies both.
And even more dimensional, because it's now two stories.
Right, yeah.
Very much. And I've got to say, you have also respected the Kelvin design because you've got lots of pipes.
Well, pipes. There weren't many pipes on the NX.
There were not. No, there were none on the TOS, and there were
There
a
are
lot.
pipes.
There's pipes all over the place on the TOS, even in corridors.
TOS, like in the roof of the engineering and going up and down, there are pipes. So I added big pipes, but there are. Oh, that's the other thing from
Big
TOS.
pipes.
The other thing from TOS is like that weird thing that has like a big barrel in it. I'm not even sure what it is. It's like off to the right in TOS. You see those big barrels here as well. So everything that is in the TOS engine room is in this engine room, and then some NX things.
Where's Scotty?
Yeah, Scotty's not born yet.
Gotcha. All right, so the last picture is a very cool shot of it at warp, and I love the you kind of got the motion picture blue glows coming off of the thing. I like it. Do we know what speed it's going in this one? Is it warp 5.2 standard cruising speed, maybe?
5.3.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You can tell by the length of the streaks.
Gotcha. Now, another thing we didn't really touch on in any of the other pictures was the rear of those nacelles are very different than, let's say, the TOS style. They're kind of there's more recessed in there.
Yeah.
And these are glowing blue. Now, do these light up blue when it's at warp and not other times, or
it's while it's at warp. And they're still like little balls, and they're just deep in there.
Yeah.
I wasn't okay. This was something that I was kind of thinking of. The original pilot version of the TOS Enterprise doesn't have the balls sticking out. So I was thinking maybe the balls are just deeper, and there's another piece of equipment that's on top of it, because I love those balls. They just make sense to me somehow. So I was thinking, well, maybe this is like a predecessor to the flat back of the nacelles in like the cage, and there's some exposed machinery that they're like, we should put a vent on that. So in the pilot episodes of TOS, we see the vent, and then later they didn't need that piece of equipment, and the balls are at the very back.
Makes
so
sense.
I don't know what exactly that is, but It's there.
It's sciencey.
I just thought I needed some lit elements at the back to balance how front lit the nacelles are. It's mostly aesthetics, but you can justify this stuff all you want.
That's what we do here as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. And that is it for the Pacific. I guess we're back to the first pitch, just for a nice front view of it with the glorious Constitution class. So thank you very much for joining us, Eric. Hope this has been a fun little discussion of your baby, and it sounds like we've given you a few little ideas here and there, which is pretty cool.
Definitely.
And I got to say, I really appreciate all the thought you put into this design, just the way you tie it all to modern technology and just the logical aspect of everything, how it works. I really appreciate that, and I think a lot of other fans will as well. So thank you very much for this awesome design.
Thank you.
I don't know if you saw, but it was #1 in Stuart's fan film top 10.
I did see that. I was flattered. Thank you.
Awesome.
Cool, that is it for another Trekyards mission briefing, fan design style. Probably a two-parter here, lots of great information, and great to have a guest on. So again, thank you, Eric, for joining us.
Absolutely.
I look forward to seeing the film whenever it comes out. But until then, you can find cool Pacific 2-1 content here at Trekyards, as with every other show, fan design, fan everything, just Star Trek in general. It's all good stuff. This is Commander Coggins.
And Captain Foley.
And Eric Henry.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.